and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning. We rewatch the Sunday morning news shows so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Thanks so much for being here. Great to start the week with you and some of the worst people on corporate TV. The collection of pundits and politicians on the Sunday morning news shows that we have watched laboriously and all collated into one giant marathon of just cynicism and depressing news. But we're going to try to make light of it on today's show.
And genocide, whitewashing.
Yes. Oh, yes. Plenty of that.
Yeah. Now, please do like the stream if you haven't already. It's a great way for us to get good numbers. This is not just for validation. Also, it's not, obviously, you're not liking the news we're covering. You're just liking the fact that we're bringing it to your attention and debunking it.
All right. Let's get going with Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. With just days to go until President Trump's tariffs take effect for nearly 70 countries all around the world, there's uncertainty about the strength of the U.S. economy following a weaker than expected jobs report on Friday. In the wake of that disappointing news.
Wait a second. What do you mean there's uncertainty? Trump was going to make America great again.
Yeah.
Isn't everything just great again? So what's the issue? I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
President Trump sent shockwaves across Washington by firing the official in charge of the numbers, Erica McIntyre, the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, claiming without any evidence that the numbers were rigged to make him look bad.
I've had issues with the numbers for a long time, but we're doing so well. I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. And there were other times. So you know what I did? I fired her. Right.
The move prompting a backlash on Capitol Hill, with some Republicans expressing concern and Democrats denouncing the president's action.
You know, Trump and all Western politicians, sadly, like to talk about the shared values between Israel and the United States, right? And I actually think this is an example of shared values because, like Israel, Trump just responds to anything that criticizes him, anything critical of him, or anything that's bad for his reputation as a lie. You know, so just like whenever anyone criticizes Israel for launching a genocide, for engaging in the starvation campaign, you know, it's because they're anti-Semitic, because they're lying. Like all the world is lying. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem. So I think that's one of the shared values is denial and smearing anyone who's inconvenient for your narrative.
And getting them fired. I mean, that's what pro-Israel donors did at all the universities.
Right.
Whose presidents refused to crack down sufficiently in their view on free speech, and they got them fired. And so now Trump just fires someone who reports accurate figures about his unimpressive job numbers. And of course, it makes sense. Like, if your economic policy centers around cutting taxes for the ultra wealthy, who are just going to keep the money for themselves, no wonder it's not a shock the economy is not going to magically bloom.
Right.
It's just this is kind of how it's always been. It's amazing people can still get away with like the standard Reaganite like what he's basically doing is trickle down economics.
Exactly.
That's what it is. It's just he doesn't call it that anymore, I guess, but it's the same thing.
Right. Oh, sorry.
It was just fired because the president or whoever decided to fire the director just did it because they didn't like the numbers. They had to grow up.
The president is firing the statistician because he doesn't like the numbers, but they are accurate. Then that's a problem.
It is the sign of an authoritarian type that when you get information you don't like, rather than deal with the issue, you fire the people who gave you the bad news.
It's classic Donald Trump. When he gets the news he doesn't like, he shoots the messenger.
I just want to put up my routine PSA for Democrats. Can we please get someone other than Chuck Schumer being like your voice? He's just not representing the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah,
Chuck Schumer. I just don't think Democrats are gonna. I mean, forget even his politics, just his whole thing, his voice, his affect. It's just not going to land if Chuck Schumer is the guy being like the voice of the anti-Trump resistance.
Yeah. He's not representing the zeitgeist, but he's representing the Zionist geist.
He sure is.
In addition to the lackluster July report, jobs numbers for May and June were also revised downward, leading to the worst 3 months of job growth since the pandemic. All of it coinciding with Mr. Trump's announcement of sweeping tariffs. As the president's August 1st deadline for tariff deals passed, he signed an executive order locking in rates set to go into effect August 7th. The United Kingdom will see 10% tariffs, and Japan and the EU will each face 15% tariffs, with those nations having made deals with the White House. While Canada, which has not yet reached terms with Mr. Trump, will face 35% tariffs on many goods.
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada, but they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led, and all we want is fairness for our country.
Aaron, as a Canadian, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like tokenized when he says I have lots of Canadian friends? Basically, it's the some of my best friends are Canadians line.
Well, look, it's just a classic thing where I don't understand tariff policy very well. It's not my forte, but this idea that like everyone's been ripping off the U.S. and that's why he has to just like tank the economy for everybody. I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't sound like a fair deal for anybody. And certainly, I don't think Canada. I can speak on behalf of Canada. Canada does not have to try to hurt or take advantage of anybody. That's not our style.
Canada's
We don't rip
style.
people off. You
Right.
know, it's a very earnest country.
It is.
So
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that Canada is the bad actor that Trump says it is.
You heard it here first, guys. Out of the mouth of a Canadian.
Democrats accusing the president of wreaking havoc on the economy.
The tariffs are going to decimate our economy if they are as extreme as the president wants.
They're very, very worried about an economy that was strongest economy in the world, not a perfect, but it was strongest economy in the world in December of 2024. Now it's got nothing but smoke coming out of it and red lights flashing.
And joining me now is the director.
All right. Well,
Alrighty.
yeah. So that was all tariff talk, basically.
Yeah. TT.
And Bureau of Labor Statistics talk. Nothing on the issue of our time, the genocide in Gaza, where Israel continues its starvation siege, and we've all seen the images coming out. And Israel doesn't really care. It just doesn't care. It's continuing its daily massacres at its routine pace. And Trump, while occasionally saying, yeah, the starvation's real, is doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
So let's turn first to Senator Tim Kane of Virginia. He was on Fox News.
And he's
Signed
asked
on to a
about the-
letter signed by a number of other Senate Democrats to Secretary Rubio expressing a lot of concerns about the specific group that we're going to talk about, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but just aid in general and trying to get it to people who are starving. Your Democratic colleague, Senator Fetterman, did not add his signature, but this is what he says on X. The suffering in Gaza is crushing and real. We've all seen the same images. Many people blame Israel, but Hamas is responsible for this hell on earth, and they could end this today for peace in the region. Where's the global outrage for Hamas to disarm and send the hostages home? Do you worry that some of the focus is getting taken off Hamas, which is ultimately responsible for what's going on?
Hamas is.
I love the question. Like, yeah, there's a starvation crisis happening imposed by Israel. But anyway, what do you think about Hamas, which is ultimately responsible for everything that's happened? You know, Hamas is also responsible for my cat going missing and every other single problem in the world, because Hamas is the root of all evil and strife.
Yeah.
Like that's basically the attitude of like corporate media. It's like Hamas is responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Not Israel, which is like the occupying power, is the one killing people, is the one imposing the starvation siege, is the one saying we're going to impose a starvation siege, and you know, calling the people of Gaza Amalek and basically painting them all to death.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating and ridiculous how this premise is baked into it. Like, oh, talking about Israel distracts from Hamas's role. No, it's actually the exact opposite. Given that Israel is imposing a starvation siege, talking about Hamas is a distraction from Israel. And it's Israel who the United States funds, brags about having a special relationship with. That is why the United States can actually right now stop this if they stop funding Israel. So anything about Hamas is actually a distraction.
Diabolical. They're a terrorist organization. They're horrible, but they're not the same as the Gazan population or the Palestinians.
All right, why are they diabolical? If they're diabolical, okay, then you really, by any consistency standards, have to call Israel diabolical. What makes them diabolical? That they killed civilians on October 7th? Yeah, that is bad. I don't like killing civilians. And they pale in comparison to Israel when it comes to killing civilians.
Palestinian people. And so there needs to be a vigorous war against Hamas and an eventual de-arming of Hamas. That needs to happen. And I think we all believe that. But innocent Palestinians, women and children, both in Gaza and on the West Bank, should not be suffering because of Hamas's atrocities. And that's why we signed on to this letter saying when it comes to humanitarian aid, rather than put it in the hands of an organization that's relatively new, whose founder resigned before the operation started because he believed that the restrictions being put upon them were inconsistent with humanitarian principles. Let the professionals do it. The World Food Program, Mercy Corps, they're organizations that have been doing food aid around the world for decades. They should be the ones helping distribute adequate humanitarian aid to Gazans.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't know what Tim Kane said about the Israeli campaign against UNRWA, the main UN agency in Gaza, but that was launched under Biden, and the Biden administration basically co-signed that campaign by Israel, and that was the first step in trying to destroy the UN aid delivery system in Gaza. When Israel claimed they had evidence that UNRWA staffers took part in October 7th, and of course, like, there was no evidence, and even if it was true, UNRWA has thousands of staffers, so like if a couple of people are involved in a militant attack, that does not in any way reflect the whole organization. But anyway, that allegation pushed by the Biden administration was used to suspend UNRWA's funding and manufacturing consent for disabling the entire UN system inside of Gaza. And so this is Trump's policy now. He deserves all the criticism in the world. So do Democrats for laying the groundwork for all of this.
And it's also really important to note that a bunch of Western countries cut funding based on the allegations against UNRWA. But they reinstated the funding. The United States didn't, but other Western governments did once it was made clear that Israel had no proof for a substantial terrorist population among UNRWA. So
well, it just speaks to what losers all these states are. And like immediately Israel says something, Israel said, okay, let's cut funding to the agency keeping Palestinians alive, even though Israel is the occupying power and has lied an infinite number of times. People are such willing dupes. And so, yes, like they eventually restored funding, but the fact that they went along with this in the first place, and it was such a transparent scam from the start, it's just it's so shameful. And that's kind of like basically the rest of the world, like, you know, other NATO states, their thing is like they'll go along with the US and Israel until the scenes of sadism and suffering just get so stark, and then they have to pull back because, you know, but they never should have been they never should have gone along with it in the first place. And
yeah, sure.
The pattern playing out.
I'm just basically pointing out that even the other very irresponsible actors who took Israel at its word, at least they had the decency to reinstate the funding, and the United States didn't.
All right, let's go back to Tim Kane in The Membrane, quoting that wonderful song by Lin-Manuel Miranda, Tim Kane, The Membrane.
Oh, yeah.
For everyone who forgot about that, I hope that's playing on loop in your head. Okay. By the way, really pink tie he's wearing. That's like the pinkest tie I've ever seen.
It really is, yeah. I like it though.
Yeah.
And it's clear that they are struggling as well. Your colleague across the aisle, Senator Tom Cotton, went to the Senate floor this week to talk about what is happening.
Like, you've heard of pink eye, you know what I mean? Like this is pink tie.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
maybe there should be some kind of like award for that, like the pinkest tie on television.
Right. The pink eye, pink tie.
Happening when aid is attempted to be delivered into Gaza and beyond. Here's what he said on the floor.
Time and again, we have seen Hamas terrorists divert aid shipments to themselves or loot delivery trucks, only to resell the supplies on the black market at outrageous prices.
He says in the last...
Except, you know, it would be, this would be a good time for Shannon to bring up the fact that many organizations, the New York Times, and 2 Israeli officials have said there's no evidence of that. Of course, Israel defenders are going to claim that it's all anti-Semitism. The New York Times is propaganda. It's anti-Semitic, but I'm not sure how they can explain away the 2 Israeli officials who say that. Although I guess they're self-loathing Jews, right? That's kind of Israel's trick. You're either an anti-Semite or a self-loathing Jew.
Last year alone, Hamas infiltrated UN aid programs to the effect of $500 billion, or $500 billion. He says $500 million. I want to get that right with an M.
$500 million. I want to get the Israeli lie correct. It's not 500
exactly.
billion, 500 million. It's still a lie, but I at least want to articulate the lie correctly.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Because, like, where does this come from? Like, where does Israel get this figure of $500 million worth of aid stolen by Hamas? Somebody works in the Israeli, propaganda department, comes up with a number. It gets disseminated down to journalists like Shannon on Fox News, and then they just repeat it. It's like, where is it? It's all, everything is just fiction. Everything is fiction in the most cynical campaign possible, because it's all done to justify starving a civilian population.
Right. And by the way, this is a good reminder. Rachel writes, Hamas does not steal food. No aid organization has ever blamed Hamas for those thefts. I'm so sick of this lie.
He says they then take that money and spend it on terror. So clearly there are no easy answers to getting this aid in.
You're right.
Actually, there are easy answers. Very easy answers.
The first answer is you're lying.
Yeah.
The second answer is that people are starving because Israel's blocking the aid, and that's what Israel promised to do. So why would you possibly, if you're like a remotely decent human being, go along with that?
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And also it's very easy to solve. Easy answers. You stop funding Israel, and you actually get in humanitarian aid. And you also reinstate the food distribution that existed before.
Right, no easy answers, although that statement, that reporting that Hamas is diverting aid is seriously questioned even by Israeli officials. The Times of Israel, Shannon, is just reporting this morning that the IDF killed 23 Gazans who are seeking food at one of these GHF sites just over the weekend.
Yeah, but Times of Israel, they've been infiltrated, and they are now self-loathing. The whole staff, self-loathing Jews.
Clearly no easy answers, but what's happening now isn't working. And so again, when you have groups like the World Food Program, headed by Cindy McCain, John McCain's widow, that have done this for decades all around the world, don't put it in the hands of a new group that that was recently formed, whose leadership has even complained that they're being restricted. Let the professionals do it.
I think Cindy Kane, I think we know what happened there, Aaron, which is that Cindy McCain is Hamas.
Yeah, again, but like with Tim Kaine's being a little naive here, it's like, this isn't working. Like,
yeah, of course. Like, yeah, 100%.
It was worth a college try, but it's just not really working. Like, like this new group is inexperienced. No, this new group is like a death machine deliberately set up to destroy the UNAID delivery system, replace it with, reduce the number of aid sites from over 400 down to just 4. And in fact, I think it's even 3 that are functioning now. And most of them are in the south. So people in Gaza have to walk really long, dangerous treks through war zone into another, through like war zone, into another war zone, line up in the hopes of getting some aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, as it's called, but it should be called the Gaza Holocaust Front. And even there, many people have been gunned down, because the whole point here is to create a death trap, to lure people for their murder and to push them further into the south to set them up for ethnic cleansing. So it's not as if this is like a new idea they're trying out just to replace the UN system. This is a death trap deliberately, and that should be called out.
Yeah, no, that's so important, and it speaks to how low my standards are for politicians, because I'm just so happy that he's even criticizing GHF at all. But yeah, it's so important that this is kind of like, Aaron, it's like when people say Vietnam was a mistake. It was a blunder, as opposed to it was a very intentional way of engaging in mass gross human rights violations for alleged political gain. I mean, didn't give us anything, obviously, except a bunch of dead soldiers and countless murdered Vietnamese people. But it's a similar thing where the point is, this is not like it is inexperienced because it was just founded. But the problem is not that this is an inexperienced foundation. The problem is it is a murderous one, as you said, Aaron, and it's so evil. I mean, as you just pointed out, but I think it bears repeating. This is a humanitarian foundation which literally lures people to their deaths. And of course, Tim Kane doesn't mention that at all.
Okay, so who is the head of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, aka the Gaza Holocaust Front? It's a guy named Johnny Moore. He is an evangelical Christian, former Trump campaign advisor, and a public relations executive. So he's very well versed in propaganda.
Yeah,
that's what public relations basically is, especially in matters of life or death. And so here he is in another interview on Fox News.
And by the way, as a Christian,
we're willing to comment.
Oops. I just want to say, as a Christian, I'm sure he condemned Israel for destroying Gaza's last Catholic church, right? I'm sure he's spoken out against that, the destruction of churches in Gaza. Yeah.
And talk about these. So what about, in part, what the senator had to say, that people are being killed when they try to come to the places that there used to be, they said, hundreds of distribution centers for the food. GHF has taken it down to 4, and they say that is just ultimately a dangerous situation.
Yeah, Shannon, I have to say I'm quite alarmed.
By the way, that noise you hear in the background, that's not from us. I think there was some kind of protest going on outside the Fox News studio on Sunday. So
also outside of MSNBC.
So pardon the background noise, everybody. But it's actually fitting. It's a fitting soundtrack because it's like basically it's like the sound of sirens and chaos, and that's a very fitting soundtrack for this guy's propaganda as he justifies using a fake aid group to slaughter and starve Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah.
To listen to a sitting United States senator and with his colleagues in that letter basically launder information that originated with Hamas and has been spread all around the world in order to discredit the only consistent food operation of the.
Yeah, it's laundering Hamas talking points. These talking points happen to be coming from people like Anthony Aguilar, who is a Green Beret, who talked about how the IDF killed a boy, an unarmed boy, right after he picked up aid. It's the talking points being put out by aid organizations, international human rights organizations, B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, and other whistleblowers who have worked for the Gaza Holocaust Front. So,
yeah, their first leader resigned before they even kicked off because he was like, "Yeah, this is I can't do this." Right. Even the guy they tapped to lead the fake aid group couldn't even go along with it because it was just so evil. Right. But Johnny Moore obviously does not have that same apprehension, and here it's just what he's saying here is it's just unbelievable. But let's hear it.
Last 2 months. That's not leadership. What leadership is what President Trump did on May 5th when he said the United States was fed up with Hamas stealing the food and we were going to do something about it. And over the last 2 months, the numbers speak for themselves. 105 million meals free to the people of Gaza. Not a single truck has been stolen by Hamas. And whether it's this, the 400 being replaced with 4 sites or these statistics about casualties in the Gaza Strip, these casualties that the senator, and by the way, I'm a constituent of the senator, and I work with a lot of constituents at GHF of the senator. These figures emerge from Hamas, and then
really the 400 sites to 4 sites have come from Hamas.
Yeah, that's just a fact that they've reduced the number of sites from over 400 to 4, and again, most of them are in the south, meaning that to even get to these fake aid sites where you risk being killed, once you get there, you have to risk being killed on your way because you have to go through war zones, and the fatalities. The number of civilians now killed at these fake aid sites is over 1,100. And we've seen them, like we've seen the videos, like the images every single day. Like those of us who haven't turned off our conscience to what's happening in Gaza, and many people have, they just shut it up, but we can see the bodies. There are people being massacred all the time. So what he's doing is just, he's engaged in Holocaust denial. Under the guise of being a humanitarian. It truly is. It's like when you watch like dystopian movies, this is the kind of like the evil like executive going on TV to lie to people. And, this is something you'd see out of, I don't know, this reminds me of like the film Total Recall or something like that.
Yeah.
Like in all this kind of like science fiction, apocalyptic movies about like, where like corporate overlords just take over society and use things like aid in the most cynical ways. It's like out of a movie, but it's real. It's the Hunger Games in a real life concentration camp.
Yeah, it's diabolical.
To use a word that they just use for Hamas, it truly is diabolical. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a level of human evil that I just that I think is unprecedented at least in recent history.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's try to hear more of this guy.
They're laundered all around the world because President Trump actually decided to lead and make a difference. We're standing here today, and there are hundreds of thousands of lives that were saved. And we don't want to argue with the United Nations, even though they don't pick up their own food, they don't deliver their food. By their own statistics, 90% of and it's unbelievable. Like, to just say, 95% of the trucks don't make it, but we have to do better. That's unacceptable. That's the United States money. That's European money. 95% of the World Food Program trucks can't get to the people in need. We haven't had a single truck taken over.
Why is it that they can't get to the people in need?
Well, first of all, Israel blocks these trucks from going through, contrary to what he says there. It imposes all these new conditions that makes a delivery impossible. And then recently, there was a World Food Program attempted delivery, and Israel attacked it.
Right.
And so under those conditions, trucks are not going to get through because Israel's blocking aid and then attacking the few times it does let trucks go through, it literally attacks the delivery workers, the World Food Program. This happened a few weeks ago. It's impossible to keep up with all the atrocities by Israel because there are just so many every single day. But, because that, like when they attack international aid workers, as they have multiple times, they also attacked, if you remember, employees of World Central Kitchen, with another organization that was on the ground but had to shut down because of the Israeli blockade. They killed people. This was, over a year ago now. And just the scale of death and misery that Israel and the U.S. have imposed on Gaza, it's beyond our comprehension. And,
people, there should be I hope there's a website, someone should make one if there isn't, of all of Israel's lies. They should just like keep updating it in real time, because it takes so long to debunk all of their lies. So it would be very helpful for people to just know that by default Israel lies.
A full website of Israeli lies would crash the internet because it's just
it's true.
It's just too many. Okay, more of Johnny Moore.
And all we want to do is we want to work with the United Nations and the World Food Program. We want to do exactly what the senator just said. That's the mandate we have from the President of the United States. But every single day, they try to sabotage everything that we're doing. I don't understand
why would they work with you when you're a fake organization designed to destroy the UN aid system in Gaza, and that it's been used to entrap people into their death? No humanitarian organization is going to work with an organization like his. It's just not going to happen. Because his is not a humanitarian aid organization; it's a genocide organization. Right. So it's like the whole reason for his existence as the head of this group is to undermine the aid system that was working. So how could possibly they work with you? It'd be like collaborating with the Nazis during the Holocaust. It's like people don't want to be collaborators with a genocide machine.
Right. Yeah. And also it's worth noting that 170 aid or NGOs, 170 of them have called for the GHF to be shut down. But we're not supposed to believe our lying eyes or experts who have literally no ulterior motive.
UN. And while some in elected office in this city and in this and around the world and in Europe would rather help Hamas than the United States, because GHF is a United States initiative with veterans on the ground making a difference.
All right, I want to talk about this whistleblower who is a veteran who has talked about, he says, inside what's going on with GHF and the security force and how that shows up. The BBC is reporting this. A retired U.S. Special Forces officer who worked at GHF centers told the BBC last week he witnessed IDF troops and U.S. contractors shooting at crowds of Palestinians near sites where he worked. He said he'd never seen such a level of brutality and use of indiscriminate and unnecessary force on starving civilians.
This is not a credible person, and these aren't credible allegations. And so much so that we immediately, when people started, again, laundering this information around the world, we did a full briefing. And I won't waste time, with the details here, but you can.
Of course not. So we can end it there. Of course not. They're not gonna waste time. We're just gonna smear this Green Beret veteran as a liar who's laundering Hamas talking points. But we're not going to get into here why you shouldn't believe him. I mean, it must be so hard to be this guy because the entire world is engaged in a conspiracy against you. A conspiracy theory that's shared by like every human rights organization, including Israeli ones, every multiple whistleblowers. And, the big conspiracy comes from actual video documentation. Despicable people.
This whistleblower speaking out is if you haven't heard his testimony, you should listen to it. He's been on various media outlets, and
he's coming on the Katie Halper show on Tuesday.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah,
well, there you go.
Smalls.
So tune into that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and then we'll have him on UI in a couple weeks.
Okay, let's turn now to someone who's not a genocide apologist. Avril Benoit, she is the head of Doctors Without Borders USA, and she's going to comment on Johnny Moore's so-called Gaza Humanitarian Organization.
The problem with the GHF is, of course, it's unsafe. It's an inefficient way to deliver aid. People have to cross very unsafe zones to reach those areas that are controlled by the IDF and military contractors from the U.S. And then there are insufficient quantities. You end up in our facilities that are near some of those GHF distribution sites in the south. We always have lots of injuries and deaths as a consequence of every single delivery. And the injuries are not only people being shot as they're leaving the zone with their bags of flour, but it's also from the trampling that happens, the injuries that happen when people are crushing and jumbling over each other because of all the gunshots against unarmed civilians who are just trying to survive with a bit of food aid. And the problem with the airdrops, of course, is that it's incredibly expensive. You don't control what's happening on the ground, who really receives the aid. It also has created extremely insecure conditions on the ground, and you can't even drop that much. So each one of these very spectacular visual displays of the parachutes landing on the ground is really the equivalent of a few trucks. What we need is to flood the zone, get all those trucks with the permissions to go in. Obviously, a ceasefire, a real permanent lasting ceasefire, will make it safe enough for the humanitarian organizations to be able to deliver the aid to people in Gaza who desperately need it.
We also saw those harrowing videos of the hostage held by Hamas. Airing videos like that is something of a war crime, isn't it?
Airing the videos?
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, I think the situation...
Great job, George. So we have a starvation campaign going on. Israel's imposed a full blockade. People are starving to death, including babies, children, elderly, everybody. And George Stephanopoulos wants to focus on, some members of, I guess, Hamas or some Palestinian militant group put out a video of an Israeli captive digging their own grave. And George Stephanopoulos isn't that a war crime? Yes. Okay. Isn't starving hundreds of thousands of people to death and routinely massacring them, is that maybe a war crime too? Like in the videos we can all see every single day of Israel slaughtering aid seekers, and he wants to focus on the behavior of one small group of Palestinian captors against one hostage who's, unlike the thousands of Palestinians being slaughtered every single week, he's still alive.
Yeah.
He's still alive. And he could be freed if Israel would just simply agree to a hostage deal to end the genocide, which it won't, because it wants to basically continue its campaign of making Gaza unlivable and setting as many people up as possible for permanent ethnic cleansing.
Also, can you imagine how many times he would have to interrupt people and say, isn't that a war crime, if he were at all responsible and consistent, but talking about Israel?
Yeah, I mean, the guests wouldn't be able to talk because you have to just constantly say about Israel, isn't that a war crime?
Yeah, it is absolutely disgusting. Like literally, you're talking about a massive war crime being committed right now, and that's what she's on to talk about, right? God forbid the expert talk about this. I mean, it's despicable. Why did he should have asked her? He might as well say, "Will you condemn Hamas?"
Mhm. Okay, well, let's turn to Democratic Senator Alex Padilla. He also was asked about Gaza.
Cannot believe George
Do
Stephanopoulos
well
did that.
or very, very well in 2026.
All right, I have to ask you about the hunger crisis in Gaza turning to overseas. Last year, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, charging him with war crimes for, quote, starvation as a method of warfare, among other charges. I have to ask you, Senator, do you believe Prime Minister Netanyahu has committed war crimes?
Yeah. Well, look, the situation in Gaza is absolutely heartbreaking, and it truly is a.
By the way, just one thing to note is even again the framing. It's framed as a hunger crisis. No, it's not a hunger crisis. It's a starvation policy. Slight difference. It's not. This is not an inevitable cost of war. This is not. Oh, this happens during times of war. No, this is a deliberate policy of blocking aid, which they announced. I mean, blocking food and aid. Yeah.
Humanitarian crisis. So Israel needs to do more, and the United States, the Trump administration can and should do more to address that. Absolutely.
But do you think that he's committed war crimes?
Well, let the experts conduct their research investigation and reach those conclusions.
Oh, great. Good news, Alex. So they have, and they've determined that they have committed war crimes, that they've committed genocide. So why don't you just go ask any of the experts at Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, not to mention the Israeli ones, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights. I'm sure he's going to update his official position on this, right? Once he finds out what they've been saying, the experts.
Again, what's happening in Gaza is heartbreaking. We need to be doing more, but addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Israel's right to defend itself are not mutually exclusive.
You're saying the U.S. has to do.
Okay, so in saying we have to stop the starvation siege of Gaza, we also still, according to like Democratic Party talking points, we still have to affirm Israel's so-called right to defend itself, which by Israeli standards means Israel's right to commit mass murder and to destroy the besieged territory that it's occupied for decades. And it's just like Gaza is not a state. There's no army. There's no army. There's no air defense. And what there was a one-day operation by people inside a concentration camp against their military occupiers. So in that situation, there is no right to defend itself, like beyond on the day of. Like if Palestinian militants are attacking Israeli civilians, Israeli soldiers every right to defend their civilians. But after that, Israel, as with every day before that, only has the obligation to end the occupation. There's no right to defend itself. It's not rocket science. Just stop occupying it. It's not your land. You have no one recognizes the Israeli control over the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. It's occupied territory. So just the only obligation is to end the occupation. And why that is so hard for anyone to just come out and publicly acknowledge in Washington, including Bernie Sanders, is really beyond me. And the fact that no one will just acknowledge Israel doesn't have the right to fire a single bullet into Gaza is why it continues, because Israel's so-called right to defend itself is used constantly as a reason to continue the genocide.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the premise is off, but let's just say for argument's sake that we accept that premise, the right to defend itself. Since when is starving people part of self-defense? Blowing kids up. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the images, obviously, of the starving children, but I saw this image of a child whose arms were blown off, and he's a toddler, and you just see, I mean, I'm sorry to be graphic, but every now and then, we get so desensitized, and then every now and then you see an image that just strikes you and like hits you in the stomach on a visceral level. And seeing this toddler whose arms are blown off and has like these bloody stumps left, it is just so abhorrent, inexcusable, and his crime is being born in Gaza. That's his crime. He gets maimed for being born in Gaza.
Okay, let's turn to Dr. Amber Ayalan, who is with Doctors Without Borders.
decades.
Do you have any hope that any of what is at the borders, those truckloads of food, aid, are ever going to make it in?
I mean, my hope is relying on the U.S. government standing up and saying, actually, our aid to Israel is contingent on the idea that our military aid to Israel is contingent on the idea that you allow humanitarian aid in. And I do feel that the U.S. government is the main government with that kind of position and that kind of leverage. And it's within our own laws, and Israel is not following our own laws. We're not upholding them.
What will it take, do you think, for the U.S. to use that leverage that you describe?
Congressmen and women standing up, and the president standing up and saying, actually, these are signed agreements. This is what we are legally bound to provide this aid. You must do this, or we don't continue to supply you with military aid. We don't continue to fund the war that we've been funding for 2 years.
It's no easy answers except that one right there.
But even there, I think it's too generous to, like, Israel just shouldn't receive any military assistance.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
if you commit a genocide and you're occupying power, it's just. But yeah, certainly. Listen, that is the point of leverage. Everyone knows it, and Trump, like Biden before him, refuses to use it.
Right.
Because he'd rather be complicit in genocide than have a ceasefire. That's just what it comes down to.
And it's also illegal for us to fund Israel because it violates the Leahy laws, the Foreign Assistance Act. So that's also relevant. Guys, we have over 2,000 people watching and less than 1,000 likes. This is unacceptable. I want to see us get to at least 1,200 by the end of the next clip. I don't know if I guess I have to give you guys more timeouts or something, but let's get those numbers up. I know that not more than half of you are hate watching this. But if you are, thanks for the clicks.
Well, if you're in the market for a hate watch, let's hear from Stephen Hayes. He is a neoconservative pundit from The Dispatch, and let's listen to his insightful take.
You can see what you need to see and then report out when you leave. The proactive note, I think, is something to
Quick
take.
thought, Steve, before we go to break.
Look, we should level set here. Hamas is responsible for the deaths and the starvation. They were responsible for starting the war. I think the risk for Israel.
Why is Simone Sanders nodding at this, by the way? Why is she nodding at this? Totally irresponsible and dishonest statement. Nothing Hamas has done, could have done on October 7th would ever justify this. Not to mention that there are a lot of things that they're accused of doing on October 7th that they didn't do. But even if they had done all the things they're accused of, this doesn't justify a mass starvation campaign.
At this point is the loss of moral authority. Israel has had moral authority since October 7th. They risk losing it now because.
Wait, sorry, I have to rewind this. We have to watch this from the beginning.
Shift in what the U.S. is actually going to do.
Level set here. Hamas is responsible for the deaths and the starvation. They were responsible for starting the war. I think the risk for Israel at this point is the loss of moral authority. Israel has had moral authority since October 7th. They risk losing it now because there clearly is starvation on the ground.
And that increasing.
Oh my God, you guys, Israel is at risk. Someone warned Israel that the moral authority they currently have as they're live streaming a genocide is at risk of disappearing.
Israel's never had moral authority. It's like it's founded on ethnic cleansing and stealing Palestinian land. So once you do that, you don't have moral authority.
Right.
So its whole premise is the exact opposite of moral authority, but because that reality is ignored, then people can pretend as if things started on October 7th. And it's not just Stephen Hayes. I mean, Bernie Sanders also says the same thing, that this Hamas started this. No, Hamas launched a one-day operation in response to a decades-long military occupation and siege that was sadistic, brutal, evil, and that was keeping 2 million people in prison in Gaza, and then millions more in the West Bank under Israeli occupation and land theft and terror. So that's what started all of this, and that's why Palestinians, they're the only actor in this party that has in this conflict that has the moral authority. Nothing about the Israeli government has moral authority, no matter who's leading it, and no matter what their tactics are. They're the occupier. Occupiers don't have moral authority. They have obligations, and the obligations to end the occupation.
Yeah, I mean, so to be fair, Bernie doesn't blame the starvation on Hamas, but yeah, as we
No,
reviewed
but he
on the
said
show
Hamas
last week,
started it. He says
yeah, yeah,
Hamas
yeah,
started this.
yes,
He
yep,
also says Israel has the right to defend
I
itself.
know,
And and Bernie also was opposed to a ceasefire early
yeah,
on. He was
that
talking
was
about a
very
humanitarian
disappointing.
pause.
Yeah,
So Bernie also, to his great shame,
yeah,
endorsed a lot of Israeli talking points. And now
yeah.
it's great that now he's moving to cut. He's trying to cut off weapons, and that's good. But I'm just saying is he should, if he's sounding like the most vile Israeli apologist, he should do some self-reflection on what he's putting out there.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, speaking of moral authority, let's take a look at Stephen Hayes. And this is why I think he has a lot of moral authority, as well as integrity, and is a very credible source. Let's take a look at this book that he wrote, The Connection by Stephen F. Hayes. How Al-Qaeda's collaboration with Saddam Hussein has endangered America. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, he was a big spokesperson for the Iraq War, a big cheerleader for the Iraq War. So let's definitely listen to this guy who wrote an entire book that's a lie, that was used as a premise to get us into an unjust and illegal and immoral war. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, let's go back to Senator Tim Kaine, because another development this week was France and the UK have announced that they will maybe recognize a Palestinian state under a lot of conditions. Like, it's basically like, if Israel doesn't agree to a ceasefire, if Palestinians completely demilitarize, like these are the conditions for that recognition. Not just Palestinians deserve a homeland of their own, that's their right, but it's like, basically this is a form of pressure on Israel. Like, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state or else. So, but even that, of course, is not acceptable to the U.S., which just won't ever recognize a Palestinian state, no matter who's in government, because Israel's whole thing is premised on denying that Palestinians are even a people and denying them the right to existence.
Right.
So here is Senator Tim Kaine talking about that, this conditional recognition of a Palestinian state by the UK, Canada, and France.
Yeah, let's talk about Hamas, because I think we all agree that this is a devastating situation, that they bear the responsibility for most of what is going on there. This week, a number of our Western allies, France, the UK, Canada, they all talked about recognizing Palestinian statehood, but Hamas says it's not going to disarm unless it gets that. So Secretary Rubio speaking to that, this idea of rewarding them in some way. Here's what he said to our Brian Kilmeade.
The UK is like, well, if Israel doesn't agree to a ceasefire by September, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. So if I'm Hamas, I say, you know what? Let's not allow there to be a ceasefire. If Hamas refuses to agree to a ceasefire, it guarantees a Palestinian state will be recognized by all these countries in September. So they're not going to agree to a ceasefire. I mean, it's so clumsy.
So what do you make about this debate, this ongoing conversation about recognizing a Palestinian state, and whether that ultimately rewards Hamas for what it started on October 7th?
First of all, I mean, like, Rubio's argument doesn't make sense, because Hamas has said, we want a ceasefire as long as it ends the genocide.
Right.
Like, that's Hamas's position. So Hamas would have every incentive, just based on their own position so far, to agree to a ceasefire, because they want to stop the genocide. That's been their whole thing. Their whole thing is, we don't want to agree to a ceasefire if it just means a pause on the genocide. We release the captives, and then the rest of Gaza gets wiped out for good. Like, that's Hamas's position. So offering,
we're crazy, irrational actors, right? Irrational. You can't reason with them.
It's yeah. Okay. Here's Tim Kaine.
Shannon, you know this history well. I think the reason that we should move toward recognition of a Palestinian state based upon conditions has nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas is evil and needs to be de-armed. The international community, including the United States, made a promise in 1947 that there would be a state of Israel and a state for Arabs, Palestine, in this space. One promise has been met. Nearly 80 years later, one promise has not been met. Volumes have been written about why, but the fact of the matter is, two promises were made. One has been met, one hasn't. What the nations are saying, and it's not just the nations that you mentioned, but more than 100 nations have done a recognition. They've said, look, we need to meet the promise that the international community made, but it needs to be conditions-based. And I think the most important condition is recognizing a Palestine when they are able to peacefully coexist with their neighbors, including Israel. And so as I read what the nations are saying. It's not an immediate recognition, no questions asked in September. It's establishing conditions that when they are met, Palestine would be recognized.
All right. Well, we know that.
And what he means by that is basically Palestinians giving up any notion of returning to their stolen homes in what is now Israel. A Palestinian state being completely neutered, having no military of its own, just being completely defenseless. And the sad thing is the Palestinian leaders had agreed to that before. The Palestinian Authority had. That was the premise of the Oslo so-called peace process. But Israel is so greedy and so diabolical that it wouldn't even accept a Palestinian surrender, and it used the Oslo peace process to steal even more Palestinian land in the West Bank. And so now at this stage, like after a nearly 2-year genocide, trying to get Palestinians to accept this evil state that has just destroyed Gaza, it's going to be a lot harder. Like, I personally think, and most people, you know, in my circle don't agree with this, but like, I think a Palestinian state, even a you know, like a demilitarized one, would be better than nothing at this point. Because I just think you have to separate the Israelis and let Israel implode on itself. It's such a psycho state. But I understand if you're a Palestinian, how that just is not acceptable, because how can you live next to this murderous entity that's destroyed so many lives and is founded on theft? And at this point is just off the spectrum in its fanaticism. Like, look at the Israeli leadership and like who's in the government. But personally, I think anything is better than the current situation. And but of course, notice how all the conditions are being trying to impose on Palestinians, none on Israel. Like the only condition on Israel is agree to a ceasefire, but not like you know, give up the West Bank settlements that make a Palestinian state impossible, stop the terror of Palestinians in the West Bank, stop starving God. You know, it's just like all the conditions should be put on Israel, not on Palestine. But of course, it's always in reverse.
Right. So it's it's so upsetting that that everyone isn't like returning the focus onto the starvation and the genocide.
Okay, well, let's turn to Trump firing the head of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics after some job numbers came in that he didn't like. And Meet the Press put together a little supercut of Trump previously relying on that same bureau when the numbers favored him. And I think this is an interview with Kevin Hassett, who is the director of the National Economic Council.
Trump himself was happy to accept the jobs numbers issued under McIntyre's leadership when the numbers were good. Take a listen to what he said in the past.
The numbers were much better, as you know, than projected by the media. In 3 months, we have created 350,000 jobs. Think of that. A lot of jobs are being created. That's what happened this morning. We saw the jobs.
So is the president prepared to fire anyone who reports data that he disagrees with?
No, absolutely not. The president wants his own people there so that when we see the numbers, they're more transparent and more reliable. And if there are big changes.
Okay, so is the president now willing to fire anyone who doesn't agree with him and puts out statistics to undermine his claims? And he says, absolutely not. The president wants his own people in there so he can trust them. So yeah, he is saying that. He wants his own people, not independent officials who will just put out the numbers no matter what they say about Trump's agenda. So yeah, that pretty much is the game here. I mean, this is a tough one. I feel bad for Trump flunkies. This is a tough one to defend. It's a tough one to defend. And I don't think this ever happened on The Apprentice. I never saw The Apprentice, but I'm pretty sure The Apprentice was not just about Trump firing people who put out numbers that he didn't like.
No, it was you're fired, but now it's basically you're fired because you said something unflattering to me.
Yeah. All right. Let's turn to U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer. Now, one funny thing about Trump's trade policy is he's imposed like exceptionally high tariffs on Brazil, even though there's no trade imbalance with Brazil at all. And the reason is that Trump doesn't like the way his ally and friend Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, is being treated. So Let's watch Jameson Greer try to defend this one.
Because the U.S. has a trade surplus with Brazil. That means, we sell them more than we buy from them. So it doesn't seem to be consistent here when you have the president put 50% tariffs on Brazil, one of the highest of any countries. And at the same time, the president is bringing up things that have nothing to do with trade when he's justifying them. He sent a letter to the current government complaining about the prosecution of his ally, Bolsonaro, who allegedly staged a coup when he lost the last election. The president called it a witch hunt. This seems politically motivated and not about trade.
There's a 10% tariff on Brazil because we have a surplus with them. That's the reciprocal tariff. And then there's a 40% tariff that the president has chosen to do under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, like we would do any sanction where we see geopolitical issues. The president has seen in Brazil, like he's seen in other countries, a misuse of law, a misuse of democracy, what one might call lawfare. It is normal to use these tools for geopolitical issues. I mean, sanctions, we've been using them for years with all kinds of countries.
You view tariffs and sanctions as the same?
See, he is right. That is correct. The U.S. has been using sanctions at its whim because speaking of the law, it gives itself the right to be like the police officer of the world to say, hey, if we don't like your government, we're going to make you suffer. We're going to put your economy in prison because we don't like your policies. Like if you're, for example, a government that's trying to redistribute your resources to your people, as many Latin American governments have tried, we're going to punish you for that. We're going to make your economy scream, as Kissinger famously said about Chile. And they've repeated that over and over and over. So actually what he's saying here, as a matter of practice, is correct. And it's just funny now that they're not just using this with sanctions, they're using this with tariffs as well. They're like, we did this with sanctions. Let's use economic terrorism with tariffs too. Like, why not? Why not?
Yeah, it's good. I do appreciate the honesty, right?
They're just different in degree. I mean, tariffs are actually lighter than a sanction. A sanction, you're cutting off a country from your financial system. You're prohibiting trade with them. A tariff, you're allowing trade. You're just putting a fee on it. It's a.
With sanctions, we strangle people. Okay, with sanctions, we take an economy and we suffocate it like this. With a tariff, it's just a nice little tap. It's a nice little light tap. It's like a nice little touch. Hey, Brazil, lay off Donald Trump's friend Bolsonaro.
Yeah,
that's what's happening here. But I do appreciate listen, Margaret Brennan is a little offended because she, her programs like hers whitewash sanctions. We don't even hear about sanctions often, but it's taken as normal as a normal policy tool just to make other economies suffer if we don't like their governments.
Yeah, she's the one who said, remember, Aaron, you had that, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Do we have sanctions yet? Do we have sanctions yet? That was her. That was Brennan.
The lead, yes, a very strong proponent of sanctions. So I appreciate the honesty from this Trump official. We're just doing like what we always do. We're using our control of the financial. We're using our control of the financial system to punish governments we don't like and who are going after the president's friends. That's what it comes down to. Okay. Well, we are coming to near the end of the show. Let's check in on Medicaid. Trump's so-called big beautiful bill slashed a lot of money from Medicaid, and how are states grappling with the fallout? Well, this is the governor of New Mexico, Michelle Grisham.
4 out of 5 New Mexicans are on Medicaid. You've got a lot of rural hospitals. Have you figured out how to implement everything Dr. Oz just laid out?
Absolutely not. There is no real way to implement this. It's more paperwork for everyone. It's more paperwork for federal government, for state governments, for county governments, for local hospitals, for independent providers. And you know what Americans really hate, Margaret? When you go to your primary care physician and you spend 20 minutes sitting at a chair, not even on the exam table, while they are inputting data into a computer. So this doesn't make any sense. We should be a society and a country that is connecting people to healthcare providers. I think the one thing that Dr. Oz represents that's a fair representation is we should be healthier as Americans. All right. Then we need to be moving out of poverty. We need drug prices. We should talk about that to come down. So go after insurance companies, do manufacturing here, make sure we can negotiate fair prices. Let states do that, because I guarantee you will do a better job than the federal government. And lastly, get people early, easy access. Today,
All right. So basically, the message there is Trump's cuts to Medicaid are creating more paperwork, adding new levels of bureaucracy to an already really confusing and dysfunctional healthcare system. So, Trump 2024 delivering on his campaign promise to strengthen Medicaid by reducing health coverage and introducing more paperwork.
And introducing more paperwork is basically increasing barriers, lowering making it harder for people to access things that they need. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I am impressed that Trump is consistent. He violates his promises on domestic policy and foreign policy. So that's something you can depend on from Trump.
All right.
Look at this. I'm sorry. I just want to. So Lawrence Fine writes, I'm on Medicaid and making me work more hours. I won't be eligible and I lose it. Yeah.
Well, exactly. That's the situation that Trump is putting, a lot of people in. Taking away already meager amounts of health coverage and imposing work conditions that will basically that a lot of people can't even meet because they're not even jobs for them to have, and B, even if they qualify, then they'll lose the coverage that they have. So it's just like it's already a system that needs more funding. Instead, Trump is taking away the funding. It's just such a scandal. It's such a scandal. It's such a betrayal of vulnerable people on top of all the barriers that exist already. While meanwhile, we give a lot of money to Israel to commit mass murder.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, that's going to do it for Monday morning. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Katie, so you want to talk about what's happening on the Katie Halper show?
Oh yeah. So we had great guests on this week. If anyone missed it, I really, really encourage you to watch our show where Jasper Nathaniel talked about the West Bank and how Trump basically has the blood of the Palestinians killed in the West Bank on his hands because he removed sanctions on the murderous settler who wound up killing him. And so we also had on Huwaida Araf and Bob Suberry, who were on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, and we talked about the totally disproportionate response to Chris Smalls, who was the only Black person on the Handala. He got beaten in a way that none of the other participants did. He's the founder of the Amazon Labor Union, but a big Palestine solidarity activist. So we're going to have Chris Smalls. He's going to talk about what happened to him. And we're going to have Anthony Aguilar, the Green Beret who we mentioned earlier, who has been blowing the whistle on what the GHF and IDF have been doing, and has a heartbreaking story about something that happened to a little boy named Amir, who kissed him and thanked him for the food and then was shot by the IDF.
Yeah, Chris Smalls, the heroic leader of the Amazon Labor Union, was beaten, just assaulted by Israel. And he just got back to the U.S. and the scenes of him arriving at the airport are really moving because, after putting himself on the line, Israel tried to make him pay a price by beating him in detention. And it's like, it's worth, just pointing out that he's the only Black member of that ship. And it's like, Israel's a racist society. And so it's really not a stretch to think that his ethnicity played a role in his abuse by Israeli captors.
And he anticipated that, actually. Chris Smalls anticipated that, knowing how racist they are. Yeah.
All right. Our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching Monday Morning. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.